So, in Madison County, a county in Mississippi, they have made a post on Facebook talking about them celebrating the day of Martin Luther King and Robert E. Lee. And on the post, Robert E. Lee's name is before Martin Luther King. Obviously, M starts before R, so bad PR on that part. But besides that being the point, only two states celebrate Robert E. Lee still, being Mississippi and Alabama. So, who is Robert E. Lee? And why is he even celebrated in these two states still? Let's go ahead and talk about that. So, who even is Robert E. Lee? So if you don't remember who Robert Edward Lee is, or you never even heard of him, Robert E. Lee was an American Confederate general. You already know where this is going. You already know why people are mad at this. Simply because of him being a Confederate general. So I thought it would be great for me to do some research and actually dig into who he is and what he has done. So he was born on January 19, 1807, and he died back in Lexington, Virginia on October 12, 1870. Robert E. Lee was born to a Revolutionary hero Henry Lee in Stafford Hall, Virginia. Robert E. Lee seemed destined for military greatness. Despite financial hardship that caused his father to depart to the West Indies, young Robert secured an appointment to the United States Military Academy, West Point. West Point is the Army's college. For the ones that don't know, once you do your 4 years there, you commission as a second lieutenant in the military. He graduated and he was also part of class 1829. 2 years later, he married Mary Curtis, a descendant of George Washington's adopted son, John Parke Curtis. Yet, with all his pedigree, Lee had not set one foot on the battlefield. Instead, he served 17 years as an officer in the Corps of Engineers, supervising and inspecting the construction of the nation's coastal defenses. Service during the 1846 War of Mexico, however, changed that. As a member of General Winfield Scott's staff, Lee distinguished himself, earning 3 brevets for gallantry and emerging from the conflict with the rank of colonel. Now, Robert E. Lee was the most successful Confederate military leader during the American Civil War, which lasted from 1861 to 1865. This also made him, by virtue of the Confederacy's defense, a chattel slavery. The most successful defender of the enslavement of African Americans. Yet his own personal record of both slavery and race is modeled with contradictions and ambivalence, which all were in plain view during his long career. Again, he was born into a prominent family in Virginia, and in his early years he was surrounded by enslaved African Americans, although that changed once he joined the Army. His wife, Mary Lee, freed her own personal enslaved people, but her father, George Washington Parke Curtis, still owned many people. And when he died, Robert E. Lee, as executor of his estate, was responsible for manumitting them within 5 years. He was widely criticized for taking the full 5 years. Lee and his wife supported the American Colonization Society before the war, but resisted the abolitionist movement. And I would like to say something. His father, the father who died, it was in the early 1800s, way before he even had to free the slaves, which was 1865, just to give context. But regardless of that, he was still widely criticized. And actually, I believe that made it worse for him. But Lee later insisted that his decision to support the Confederacy was not founded on the defense of slavery. During both Maryland and Gettysburg campaigns, Lee's officers kidnapped, freed blacks, and sold them into slavery. By 1865, Lee supported the enlistment of African Americans into the Confederate Army, but he surrendered before a plan could be implemented. After the war, he generally opposed racial and political equality for African Americans. Now, a lot of people might remember what happened back during the George Floyd incident in the early 2020s. In Richmond, Virginia, Robert E. Lee statue was removed and it was placed in the city's Black History Museum. And that is when it became precedent again of his name, and people started to remember who he was and want to do research. But since the day was coming up, which is next week, Martin Luther King's Day and Robert E. Lee's Day, I just wanted to give you all some background information on who Robert E. Lee was, the Confederate general, and just make your own opinion about him. And do you think he was, or do you think he stood on racial injustice, or do you believe he actually was a good man who was just placed in a bad age of the United States of America being the way it was, and he just had to fall into that stigma of just not treating African Americans as first-class citizens? I gave you all little information of who he was and how he was raised when it came to the likeness of African Americans, but to be fully sure and to confirm your opinions on him, you all should do your own individual research and make your own opinions based on that way and not me. But with that being said, with the information I did provide, how did you feel about him back then? And how do you think people will feel about him now? Put in the comment section below. And as always, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I'm Forward March TV, signing out.